I'm an event producer here at Pixel Point LLC, and and we've been working with fraternal groups for several years now, doing everything from leadership conferences and technical support up to conventions. And we also have Karen McKenzie from Rhyme and Reason on here. Hi, Karen.
Hello. Hey guys. Yeah, creative director at Rhyme and Reason Design. So happy to be here. We've worked in the fraternal space for about 13 years. We provide branding and graphic design services. And in addition to doing, organizational rebrands, we also do a lot of branding for conventions. So historically, we've done the physical, collateral, and the environmental design. And now we're pivoting with the rest of the world as we try to navigate this new virtual space.
Great. So we've been working with Rhyme and Reason for a while now, with some specific clients, and also looking to the future of how can we support various groups that are looking at virtual events, that are looking at in-person events, and the hybrid space in between. One of the interesting topics that's come up in the last year, and I'll go through a tiny bit of the history, but not bore you too much, is the opportunities that it provides. If I go on the right thing. So a year ago, we were all doing live and in-person conferences, of course. And then when the pandemic hits, we're all going into lockdown, fallback mode to a plan that none of us had in place of how do we do our events if they're not in person. Some groups canceled, some groups were able to execute something close to what they were planning with a lot of difficulty. But most of them were doing some sort of limited Zoom meeting or something like that to fulfill the business meeting obligations, but losing the items that that really filled out the conventions and the events outside of the actual business portion. Just because of practicality, how do we handle all these attendees? How do we get them online? Where do we go? All of those questions. Some groups have postponed their conventions or meetings until later. It was in the fall or the winter or next summer, until they could provide a plan that more fully met their needs and requirements and desires for what their event should look like. And our focus, as much as we do live production work and virtual events, and Rhyme and Reason does graphics and branding and all that, our view is not just how you look, it's your message. How do you get your message across? How do you reach your members, your attendees, your participants in a meaningful way? That's why we all love what we do. That's why we're here. So now we reach the current phase of where we are now, which is we're starting to see some more robust virtual events. And those are taking various shapes. One of the groups that we've worked with in the past is doing a 3D environment with avatars where their attendees are walking around and able to interact with one another. There's no web cameras, but they get that increased interaction format. Some of ours are doing web meetings of sorts. Some are doing a more robust attendee portal with lots of web meetings and breakout groups and things of that sort. So there's a wide variety that's kind of going on right now as different groups are exploring what's possible. And some of these are due to planning that started in the fall, and our research is ongoing. We did a lot of research internally in our team in the summer and fall on what was possible, what was practical, what different companies were offering. And all those companies keep on pushing out new features, kind of competing with each other. And just like in a hotel, we design our events around the space that we have. So do we have a ballroom? Do we have breakout rooms? What is our physical space and how we're going to design our event around it? A lot of times we design in a virtual sense our events around the virtual space, which keeps changing on us for the better. But we're taking what we, wherever we start on our planning process, going from there. But as we start looking to the future, the coming summer, and then in the future years, what does it look like? And now that we're looking at it head on and not reactive, but proactive, what are the opportunities it gains? Not just to fulfill our obligations, but does this, as we sit back and think about it, does this change what we're doing in a good way? Not because we have to, but because we want to, especially as in-person events start coming back. Does virtual still have a place for us here? and what does that look like? And so that is where we come back to the topic of our presentation, which is how to reach members through virtual and hybrid. And with that, we mean not only your current people you're already reaching, like the ones who are supposed to come to the conference anyway, but how do you reach new ones? So we get into that. The opportunities of virtual events really dive into reaching more people and supporting those attendees who can't make it. You could say that's more people, but we look at them differently. You've got the attendees that were never going to come in the first place. You got the attendees who wanted to come but couldn't because you don't have enough seats. You've got the attendees who were going to come but can't for whatever reason. And then you got the attendees who did come and can't for whatever reason. And one of the things we've also kind of learned, it has its own challenges, but virtual can have a place even in an in-person event for the in-person attendees. Um, so it's a way, almost like when you go to a stadium and you step out from the game to go get a hot dog or something, and there's the game playing on the TV, like you can't escape it. There's an opportunity there to reach even and interact even with your in-person attendees. Reaching new audiences, new types of people. You may have not really reached out to your donor class as much. You may not have reached out to your newest members as much. You might not have reached out to alumni or alumni who haven't been as active over the years. There's a lot of different classifications of members or even non-members, people associated with the organization in some way that you just really haven't programmed too much, you haven't reached out too much. And with the price tag that's associated with every seat at a conference, it may just not have been practical. You just didn't really, there wasn't really a spot for them. And virtual events really breaks down those walls, figuratively and literally. And so we don't have a lot of those restrictions to where we can start looking at those opportunities. And the last one, hosting new experiences not practical before. We did, and I'll bring those, we did some work with Kappa Kappa Gamma and Alpha Phi this past fall, working with them on their 200th celebrations. Kappa Kappa Gamma was doing a video project filmed in Monmouth, Illinois at the Alpha chapter location. Originally, there was going to be some festivities throughout the period of time, throughout the summer and going into the fall, but a lot of it was focused on the convention. With the convention not executing in person, we still needed to get that message out. And that's when we started working with Kappa Kappa Gamma on a way to do either a live broadcast or a recorded, edited version. And we ended up putting out a product which launched on YouTube, which was able to reach collegiate members at home who would have never attended the convention. So that's a case where we can get that message out, we can reach those attendees in a project that was, because it had to go virtual, actually increased its reach. And the project, instead of just in an archive somewhere of what happened at the convention, is actually still there for collegiate members, for alumni or other people to stumble across and re-experience. So Alpha Phi did something similar. They did a project where they were going around with not only the different pieces in the video, but they filmed different executive directors and people around the country. Instead of one location, it was filmed all over and put together. So they had no one traveling, and they were able to put together something with a very personal touch, which was able to reach, again, a wide audience. Theirs was I'm sorry, this wasn't, forgive me, not 200, it's 150th. But theirs was the 148. My math is way off today, but theirs was the 148 and going into their 150th biennium. So both of those groups, again, really embracing, this is an important message. We cannot lose this year. This year will not come again. It's an anniversary year, right? So we cannot lose it. So how do we make the most of it? And not just make the most of it, but how do we make it meaningful and good? Because when we stop thinking, I feel like when we stop thinking about it as, is it good enough? Is this replacing our event well enough? Did we meet our goals well enough? And we start thinking about those opportunities, that's when we really start jumping ahead. So both reach larger audiences, both are still online for years to come. When we look, we're an event company. We do a lot of other multimedia projects, but at the core of what we do, we're an event company. And for Pixel Point, of course. And so when we look at virtual events breaks down those walls. We all know, for those of us who are event planners, every person has a dollar amount associated with them for their seat, whether they're paying for their own ticket, whether it's paid for by the organization, by donors, whoever's paying for it, there's a dollar tag associated for food, for hotel, for materials, for convention space, for keynote speakers, software systems, staff time, everything under the sun. And not to mention any on their own expenses, of course, for travel and whatnot. For virtual events are not free. They still take time to do. Even if you do a Zoom meeting in-house, your staff has time on it. You have your Zoom account, so it may be a really low cost, but there's still a cost associated. So it may be worth doing some events for free, but our view is virtual events are not worthless. They have a value. And how much you want to budget for it is an internal decision for your organization. And there's a wide range from low expense to high expense opportunities available depending on what you want. Just like if you're bringing in a keynote speaker, there's a difference between a high expense keynote and a low expense keynote, right? So you have the same with software systems, you have the same with partners, relationships, branding, any type of service, whether it's in person or virtual, there's a range there. Our goal is just to how best to meet those needs. But in that virtual event, you don't have that high dollar tag associated with them. You do have a lower one, we believe. And you also have, you don't have the restrictions of the in-person in terms of how many people per room, within reason. Zoom large group goes up to 1,000. Obviously, that's a little complex because you can only see 49 on a screen, so you have to kind of page through it, but you get kind of that scope of the room size. We also talked with one group about doing in the places where the collegiate members were together, physically together in their own COVID bubbles, they could attend together in some of those general sessions to where you get a couch of collegiate members. That gives a personal touch to it, a feeling, and also increases your scale because you have less web cameras. Less web cameras means you can get more people in that 1,000 camera room. In these smaller rooms, in your in-person event at a hotel, you might have, I booked a ballroom for legislative, a ballroom for meals, and I've got 10 breakout rooms. How am I going to use those 10 breakout rooms? Because of my schedule, I've got 10 workshop blocks. How am I going to use those 10 rooms and those 10 workshop blocks? And you may have been adding in programming that was only done because you had a space to fill. And you may have had other programming that you cut out because it just wasn't long enough for the workshop block, or it was too long for the workshop block, or you just had too many different things competing for space and some of them had to get cut. In a virtual event, you can have as many rooms as you want, as few rooms as you want. In terms of schedule, depending on how you execute a virtual event, some events follow a more rigid schedule and you still have those locked in workshop block sizes. Some are a little bit more ad hoc, especially given, trying to work around meal constraints and other things. And they aren't following a rigid schedule as much. They might say, this session is going to be 30 minutes and you're going to have a 30-minute break afterwards. It's okay. This one's going to be an hour and a half. It gives you some flexibility you just did not have before. And that flexibility gives opportunity. It doesn't mean it has to be used, but it means that it's there for you if you want it. We are doing events right now with over 500 breakout sessions in a single conference. Obviously, now those are not all at the same time, but obviously that takes a lot of planning and a lot of facilitators to facilitate those breakout sessions. But you can get, especially with virtual, we all know the challenges of in-person or of virtual, of trying to interact in a web meeting where you can't easily see everyone. And we try emoji sticks and feedback indicators and all of those things, roundtable discussions where we tell people to go one at a time to try and facilitate those discussions. But we know from experience, large groups tend to be quieter in terms of collaboration, discussion, and those things. And that's where the breakout rooms, the sub-breakout rooms, and the small groups really gain value. So that may be part of it, of why we're seeing more. Part of it is the opportunity, part of it might be a necessity, but however it is, we're able to do events with literally hundreds of breakout sessions. And in a number of the systems, you don't have to worry about Zoom licenses and all that. So you don't have to worry about the overhead associated with that. But however you do it, whether it's bring your own license, whether it's a system that has them, you have that flexibility. So we've got some where they're doing 5 tracks in the weekend. The collegiate members are deciding which track they're going to be in. They have an opening session, a track, a closing session, and that's it. And there's like 5 tracks that day. So it's a very more consolidated, smaller type of, in terms of the scope of number of sessions. And we've got the other ones where there's like, you look at welcome sessions and there's like 20 or 50 of them because they broke out everyone to that smaller size. So those sessions can also grow or shrink. When you're planning an in-person event, you're saying, I need a ballroom because I've got 1,000 people, or 500 people I got to put together for this session. It's a keynote or whatever it is, or it's a training, regional training course, and I've got 5 regions in attendance at the convention. I need 5 of the largest breakouts for these 200-person meetings or whatever it is. But then you realize as your planning continues, well, I need 1 less large room. I need a couple more small rooms. I need a couple more large rooms, less small rooms. It's really hard to flex like that in an in-person event because you just don't have the physical space. So virtual gives you that flexibility where that size of room can go from 10 people to 1,000 people, up higher. If you go into like a webinar mode or something like that, you can go up into the tens of thousands if you wanted to, all in the same session. So it gives you that kind of flexibility in planning and in execution later, and expanding that audience again. As we start looking at hybrid, you start looking at specific per session, but even in individual sessions, if that session needs to be bigger, you don't have to cap it because there aren't enough seats. It may be capped based on execution, how you want the discussion to go. And if you put too many people in there, it stifles discussion. That's more on the programming side of what works best in that sense. But you can't make that determination across the board. Some do better with more interaction, some do better with less interaction. We had a keynote or a keynote speaker who joined us for one of our webinars in the fall, if you joined us then, who was talking about certain topics where it has the benefit of anonymity to turn off web cameras and do a webinar because it brings open sensitive conversations where people don't want to be on camera discussing it. So depending on what your needs are, you can adapt without worrying about the physical constraints. Just to highlight 2 of the ones we're working with this week alone, Alpha Phi starting their first Leadership Academy this weekend with a roughly 50% increase in attendance over last year. They do a 2-conference series for like a West-East type model. And just in the first weekend alone, there's a 50% increase. Not because of, it's because before they were physically limited on how many people could attend. And now those limitations are dropped. Now they're limited by staffing and facilitators and things of that sort, but not by physical space. Sigma Nu, we just did a conference with them earlier this year. That was more of a presidents only type model. Now they're getting into the regional institute program where more of the larger collegiate attendance is allowed to come in. And they're seeing a similar, I don't have the numbers on that, but that starts, I think, this weekend. And they're also seeing an increase in the interest level of that. So we definitely are seeing a direct, tangible, proven benefit from that. Now those are looking at virtual. And I'll look at hybrid in just a moment. But just in one more looking at virtual, what do we need to do in terms of process, materials? And I'll say that virtual events, they're very similar to in-person events in a lot of ways. You're still looking at a branding, you're still looking at marketing communication plan, registration process, you're still looking at graphics, slides. In those breakout sessions, you can still have a PowerPoint. If you don't need one, that's fine. If you do need one, you're still doing the same basic thing. It's just a screen share like I'm doing instead of a projector in a room. The platform itself, in terms of how am I going to message them, email them, send them messages, website for marketing, website for support, FAQ, tech support, all those things, the actual attendee portal once they're in there, virtual meeting rooms, all of those areas can still use branding, graphics, materials, videos. The level that you do that is really up to you. That's a key point I want to kind of put in there is just because any platform you pick has the capability of doing it doesn't mean you need to. And just because you pick one where you think, oh, well, I'm just doing a Zoom meeting, doesn't mean that you have to go without just because it's Zoom. If it makes sense to help your attendees feel at home and feel that that this is something more than just a casual meetup, you can still do a lot of those correlated materials. And Karen, I'll have Karen chime in here in just a minute to kind of give you some examples and talk about some of the things that they're doing in that regard. As we kind of get to the end of on the format side, there's a spectrum. People think, okay, I'm doing virtual, but I want to get back to in-person. That's fine. We want to get back to in-person. We're a live event production company. We want to be there. Virtual obviously is an opportunity, and it's something that's helping us during this downtime. It's helping all of you get your message out there and meet up with your members and give them the programming and the value of their membership before you can get back in person. But let's look at this spectrum and how we're going forward. Fully virtual, that's what we're doing now, everyone at home. Virtual pre-post-com materials. Some of you are already doing that now where you're doing LMS, you're doing training modules and things before the conference, before they even come in person. And now you're doing that before they do the virtual conference. Same idea. You were already doing a virtual conference aspect and didn't really realize it. You can still do things like that, whether it's meetings, it could be staff meetings, it can be attendee meetings, it can be alumni donor meetups, whatever it is. You don't have to think of just, when you're thinking hybrid, you don't have to think of just all or nothing. It can be a session by session decision. Some will make more sense than others. In person with some virtual meetings for those in attendance or not. And that's where we're kind of getting into here of, you're in person at a conference, you have those physical space limitations. Does it make sense to have a virtual meeting when you're in person? And some of the discussions I've had, they'll say, no, we're in person. We really don't need to be hopping on a computer. Other ones will say, we don't have the space. We need to have a staff meeting or an executive council meeting. Someone's not here. How do we chime them in? Maybe it makes sense to have some people in a room and everyone else who's remote. Maybe it is that your staff is traveling around. You're used to doing conference calls. You can do a conference call with video if necessary, or just audio. Again, the difference between conference call and on a scheduled time and a Zoom meeting isn't all that different. If all of us turn our cameras off and screen share off, we would be doing a conference call. So that range that we're going through here, it's a flexibility of where you want to go with it. Partial, hybrid, some general sessions are hybrid, but otherwise in person. So these are things that we've done in the past. You're doing your convention, you're doing your workshops, your in-person experiences, and then you have some people who are attendees who are remote and they can't make it, and you want to share the general sessions with them. Whether it's public information or whether it's private through a secure link, you want to basically webcast it so they can join in the experience. But webcasting really wasn't a two-way street. It was a way for remote attendees to watch what was going on, but not to participate. It just allowed them to keep a connection. It was more for their benefit than yours in that communication regard. Now, what we're looking at is like, okay, in a hybrid sense, how did those remote attendees contribute? Q&A, do they send in Q&A? If it's a voting session, are they voting remotely? Do they chime in and you're bringing their video or audio into the physical room so that they can debate and be a part of the process that way? What does that look like? And then once you figure out that level of hybrid in each session, does it make sense that that's only in general session rooms? Does it make sense that you're gonna have certain, doesn't have to be all, that gets expensive, but certain smart rooms where that particular breakout room is equipped to allow for a hybrid audience, and you have a moderator in the room who is taking questions remotely or bringing people in who are remote or answering those kinds of remote questions, but the presenter is the same doing both. And then you get into the other model of some things are not going to make sense to do for virtual attendees, like a trust fall exercise doesn't translate well virtually. Your virtual audience may have better on collaborative things with a video game aspect. where it's hard to put everyone in front of a computer in a workshop room to do that. Now you can give virtual a whiteboard, and you can do in person in a piece of paper and have a similar experience. So then you start looking at which sessions should be hybrid, which sessions should be mirrored, where there's an in-person version and a virtual version, and which sessions should just be different. And look at the audiences not as the same to do everything the same, but does it make sense that your virtual audience is doing the general sessions, a few hybrid specific breakouts, and then the rest is virtual only programming. And then the other group in person is doing just the in-person side. So there's some shared and some non-shared experiences. And does it make sense that, well, yeah, those are kind of those last two, is looking at which sessions and how to tie those experiences. A lot of that's going to come down to that moderator, that in-person moderator who is able to bridge the gap. Or again, when you get to those, which sessions are in-person, which sessions are virtual, to provide almost like two different attendee experiences, whether it's the same content or different content. So this is kind of a spectrum, really kind of looking at what is the best fit. As we start looking forward of getting back in person, is there still social distancing and there's a cap on how many people can be in the room? Is there is there just the normal limitation where we can have, all of our organizations are growing, but the space that we're using is still limited until we go to that next size venue? Or are we looking at virtual events and experiences? I'm going to kind of skip through this one. I'm giving some specific examples here, but that event is not economical, so you never had it before in person, but now virtual you could, or whether it just tailors better virtual. Some of those different opportunities that can start going out there. So getting in your guest shoes, and this is where I'm going to tie in Karen, as we're looking at virtual attendees, whether they're hybrid and they are watching video feeds from inside a physical location, or whether they are just a fully virtual room and all they see is what you provide. There's no hotel lobby. There's no grand ballrooms, no Disneyland, right? I mean, it's your emails, your messaging, website, attendee portal, all of these different spaces and communication methods. That is the perception your attendees have. So we feel it's important when we're designing events, and for you when you're designing events, to walk in your guest shoes. What are they going to see as they interact? What are they going to interact with? As we look on the messaging aspect, are we, destination messaging versus organizational messaging? Technical support, engagement, where are they going to go? How are they going to get there? How are they going to be reminded, realizing that you are pulling them in and out of two different worlds, their personal life world or wherever they physically are, into the virtual world? Sometimes they need more communication. We had one group who was sending like 5 messages or so a day through platforms to engage and keep people up to date on where they need to be, what's going on. And all of these spaces is your way of communicating with those attendees to make them feel like they've arrived home. What website you're sending them to, is it your website or a different one? Emails, where is that email coming from? How does it look? Does it look like you? Does it feel like you? Does it sound like you? And do your attendees, when they come to the experience, feel like they are coming to your experience? And that's where I want to, I have some samples of stuff I can show, but I wanted to bring in Karen here to kind of speak more on that of that attendee experience and what you guys are doing now, Karen, on supporting those kinds of virtual materials.
Perfect. Are you okay if I
Yeah,
share
go right
my
ahead.
screen just for a moment?
Kick me out.
It will not let me kick you out.
Okay. How about that?
Let's see. Did everybody see a transition? See a bright red screen? Yeah, so Zach touched on a lot of things, and we're going to take about 10 minutes just to dive into a little bit of the branding piece, knowing that there are a lot of designers in this group, and also that convention season, while this summer seems far away, all of that planning really happens now. It may have already kicked off for your organization, but if it didn't in 2020, you guys are certainly looking at planning for those events. Those of you that have 2021 conventions now. So wanted to just speak to really how important branding still is. I know for all of us, we're accustomed to, all right, you've got the brand, you've got registration booklets and program booklets, and you have banners on the wall and environmental graphics, and that's the bread and butter of what we do for our clients. And this year we're really having to sit down and figure out how we transition those pieces. And some of those will transition very easily, and some of them, won't be needed at all. But we don't want to throw the brand out entirely, because as Zach pointed out, like creating this sense of space for your attendees is still really important. I think everybody wants to get out of their house. They want to get off the couch. So even if it's just an experience through your conference or convention that's allowing them to do that, that is a win. So one thing that, again, Zach touched on, and we're just going to dive in and do a little inspiration, give you guys some ideas just on the evolution of themes. Historically, in the Greek world, conventions often built their themes around a geographic location, whether it was the city or an event that happened in the city. This is an example that we worked with SIGEP on, and it was the convention was in Houston, and so we tied in the space theme, and you see how that brand then fills every space and gives us something to work with. And now we don't have geographic locations to feed off of. There is no Disneyland. There are no city landmarks or attractions that we can really hang our hat on. And so it'll be a different task of what to do with that messaging and tagline. So we wanted to give you guys just a couple ideas. First, if you have a milestone coming up, count yourself lucky. You probably already had that on the calendar and you've already been planning for it. That's an easy go-to. If you're celebrating your 125th, your 200th, those are great things for your group to rally around. And you may have work sort of done for you, which is great. Another direction you can go is really digging into the why behind your organization, the why behind you have your convention and why you get together. And that may be a piece of ritual. It may be something that your organization just tends to say, whether it's been something recent or just something that you say to sisters and brothers that hasn't already been used in another piece of collateral. That's another great way to push your messaging, because it's something that hopefully your constituents will recognize and be able to really resonate with. Another option is making it relevant. We're in, unprecedented times, and I think there are a lot of themes now that we can pull from, resilience and hope. Like, we're in a place where we're not out of the woods yet, but we're headed in the right direction, and there's a lot to look forward to as far as getting the vaccine out there, putting this pandemic behind us. And there have been a lot of lessons learned over the last year, and so I think that's another opportunity for your group as you're thinking through messaging for what your convention might be, to lean into that. And last but not least, it is one of our core values, fun, but it is an opportunity to have fun with it. Again, unprecedented times. Hopefully we are never back in these shoes ever again. So if you can tastefully find a way to incorporate that into your theme, this is, I guess, the year to do it. And then the next thing I wanted to touch on, and we'll just stick to sort of two buckets here, but bridging that digital to physical. And again, Zach spoke on it, but creating a space for your attendees to feel like they're coming home, they're coming to a specific event, they're not just still in their living room, that it's been thought through and cohesively branded to take them and transport them to another place. And we just have some ideas on how to do that. One is tangibles. Everybody loves to receive things in the mail, whether it's, t-shirt, notebooks, pens, any sort of swag, especially if it's a surprise for them, is really nice. So some of this stuff might be a surprise. Some of it may be conference things that you've done in the past. I know at SIGEP, using them for an example, just because I'm in that headspace, but they have a pin that they create, a custom pin with the brand for that convention year. And that's a piece that should hopefully live on. they may not be together in person, but that's something that I know brothers collect and value. And so thinking about things that maybe you would have been producing anyways, think about those items that might carry over really well that you could send to your brothers and sisters. I know cost is always a factor. So one creative way to do things is to partner with sponsors to get some of those things done. I know Pixel Point's actually done a great job with that as far as being able to work with folks and leverage sponsor partners to print t-shirts that then go out in the swag box and leverage some of those marketing opportunities and sponsorship opportunities to still create some of those tangibles without coming out of pocket too much. So yeah, number one is tangibles. Two, interactive elements. I know the bigger the group gets, the quieter everybody gets, but one of the, I think, most important things is trying to create these groups and create comfortable spaces for people to interact. And a lot of these platforms offer those breakout groups, and you can engineer it certainly on your end to make sure that in addition to maybe these big keynote speakers, that you also have these smaller groupings of people so folks can really interact. And thinking ahead a little bit on those items can go a long way. I know one of our groups created custom backgrounds so that collegians and alumni had different colors. So when they were in a Zoom meeting together, if they all threw their backgrounds on, it was very easy to tell kind of who fit into what category. I know Pixel Points helps folks with some like emoji paddles or even blank paddles where you send both the paddle and the pen and then people can write messages on them. Anyway, you can think ahead a little bit to get people engaged. And again, forgetting that they're in their house and transport them to this digital space is really, really effective. And there are ways that you can do that without sending things in advance. One just idea that I had this morning is based off of some internal stuff is if you have maybe a coffee or an early morning meeting, encourage everybody to bring their most ridiculous mug and drink their coffee out of a ridiculous mug. And then create some networking and conversation around that. Just giving people a space to step out of their usual home, because that's where we're all stuck these days. Couple other things could be hats, could be Zeta sending crowns, just trying to weave in your organization's brand in a way that is going to connect with your constituents. And then the last item, and again, one of our core values, but getting creative. Surprise and delight is something that we try to do with all of our work, and putting a little extra brain power to thinking outside the box goes a long way. So instead of maybe just sending a blank notebook and a pen, I'm going to use AOPI. I know some of them are here and they have their 125th coming up, but maybe it's making a book that has 125 ways to inspire ambition or aspirations, something that's tying sort of the swag maybe that you're sending in again with some of the core being of your organization or your theme. We have one client, they're in financial consulting, so different realm, but they wanted to send their clients some swag. They wanted them to feel like seen and known. And as financial consultants, tax season is both a burden and kind of a big milestone for them and their clients. And so we worked with them to create some custom ridiculous socks and built this campaign around the sock market, and the sock market being up, and giving them a little bit of humor and creativity that they could share with their clients in this time where we're all a little bit isolated, and we can appreciate a little bit of a laugh and some creativity to, again, just push those ideas outside the box. And I think doing that in your conventions will also help just create these memorable experiences for your brothers and sisters. So that is where I'm going to kick it back to Zach. Let me.
Thanks, Karen.
Zach,
real quick before we get into the Q&A, I wanted to as we're talking about practical examples of how to execute. So we're talking about the opportunities that are there to reach members through hybrid, through virtual, whether it's new experiences, things that have gone virtual, things that will go back to in-person or go back hybrid, whatever the format is. We know one of the biggest challenges I hear over and over again is, yeah, but it won't be the same. Or, yeah, but how do I do it? This is all, I know how to do it in person. I do not know how to do this virtual thing. It's going to look like Zoom. And our goal, with it, Karen, with us here, is it doesn't have to look like Zoom. If you want it to look like Zoom, if that's the particular design goal that you're going for, that's great, obviously achievable pretty easily. If you want that, like, well, how do I make them feel like this is bigger than any of us? We are a family, we're a collective organization, all of us. How do you get that sense of scale, that scope? How do I have my speakers go up to the podium if they don't have a script? How do I make them not look like they're reading off of a script? How do I keep everyone in sync? How do I do all these things when everyone is disparate or in different places? Obviously, some of these tools are more virtual specific. Some of them go hybrid. It's kind of along the way. Real quick, before I dive into examples, this is one that we've looked at it allows you to do almost a network television style interface. Your presenters call in like a webinar, but instead of joining on Zoom, they join through this platform. And then we basically take the video feed of the combined experience and pipe it back out. This is more of a webinar type thing like you would see for a general session. This example, they're going more for the social media style. But you can kind of see here multiple video feeds integrated in like network style television. So that's obviously an option. How do I keep people all in sync? You can do a teleprompter. Teleprompters don't just have to be physical. There's a couple companies that do virtual teleprompters where basically you can control it from your computer, and there's a web window that the person has open on their computer. And as you're scrolling it, it scrolls on their computer. You make a change, it makes a change on their computer. So basically it's like you're editing a web page and scrolling it in real time for them, keeping everyone in sync. It's a really neat thing to kind of do a live multi-person scripted experience without with it seeming polished. Again, looking into different editing type things. So there's ways to really make it polished, doing graphics, doing multiple video aspects. There's communication tools for keeping your presenters all in the loop like Zoom, to where they can collaborate, they can chat with each other without being public, so that they can stay on the same page and whisper to the next person over questions without doing text message chains, which of course you can do as well. So the tooling is there to support it. We're happy, obviously we're very limited on time, so we're happy to give examples, demos of all sorts of things that are available, no matter what vendor you go through, of course. And I'm going to show you some examples of some virtual event executions, but again, the concepts translate. There's different platforms, one you may already be using, one that another vendor provides you. It doesn't really matter. And our goal, it's you getting that message out. So here's one from Alpha Phi on their website. They're actually using video backgrounds. They have information about the event, speakers, staff, sponsors, all that kind of stuff. When you start getting into the actual sponsor information, FAQ, community, you can actually put, the platform can provide you that website. Cvent, for many of you that use Cvent, they provide a website, marketing website, registration, all that. But a lot of times that sort of stops when you get to the point of the in-person. Cvent does have a virtual attendee portal. This is Bizibo with us that does all of it, does the virtual attendee portal, registration, event website, all that, email marketing. On the actual, when you get into the session or the agenda, it gives you the ability to have speaker profile, sponsorship information on your schedule. And one of the neat things on here is we can actually build, and other platforms have this too, this is where my experience is, build private agendas. So again, we're doing conferences right now with over 500 sessions. If you were to print that in a program book, you'd be giving them a phone book. No one wants to like go through that trying to figure out where am I supposed to go. And as one group explained to us, they printed out stickers with personal agendas and put it on the back of name tags for in-person events, saying this is where you're going to go. So we did the same thing with pre-registering people for sessions. So we hid all of the sessions except for what they are personally registered for, which we did for them, to where they see a personalized agenda when they come in. So instead of seeing all these rooms, they only see that. A practical example of this in a real world situation is a staff meeting. It's something that you don't want everyone else to see. You only want your staff to see it. And so when they go to their personal agenda, here's the staff meeting, and it's unlisted. Same idea translated over to do basically a fully scheduled instructional training conference. So you got those kinds of things. Of course, you can do public to where you are marketing those opportunities, what the workshops are going to be, who the speakers are going to be, able to connect with the speakers, see more about them. If it's people from your own staff, you know, whether they're a listed speaker or a moderator, so they're unlisted, you have different opportunities there. If I go into all the websites are customizable, so you can build out your own pages. You can build out as far as like drag and drop conferences. Anybody who's done Weebly, Wix, any of those kinds of things, the simpler build your own website aspect. I mean, this platform has it. Some others do too. And you can customize it down to a greater degree. This platform and this one with a video background and different toolbar is the same platform. You can see from the domain names, we're getting these linked to their actual domain. So the branding's consistent, the domain is consistent, the email is from your email. As far as the attendees concerned, you set this up in your office server. Like this is a part of your organization, and when they come to your event, they're coming to you. And that's kind of our goal, whether it's in branding, whether it's in messaging, whether it's in attendee portals, swag boxes, any aspect of your event. We want your attendees to feel like they've just taken another step into your organization. And that's when we're kind of looking at when we're looking at all of these opportunities, virtual, hybrid, is it a virtual, is it used to be in person, now it's virtual? Is it used to be in person, now it's virtual, now it's going to be hybrid? Is it, I want to add this other event that's only going to be for a subgroup of members, or for alumni events, or for donors? What is it that we're going to do in terms of all of these different types of groups, different types of events, and what is that, what's the best way to add in those messaging aspects to support that? So Karen's team and my team here at Pixel Point are happy to answer any questions now, but also to help you out in the future. If you have any questions, need any guidance, recommendations, thoughts, you just need someone to run something by, we're happily members of this community, and we're happy to support you any way we can, even if it's a little advice. So feel free to, we've got some Q&A time now, at least a few minutes. And of course, afterwards, if you have any questions down the road. So with that, we'll turn it over to if anyone wants to chime in, unless there's a moderator, but.
I could be the faux moderator. We didn't have anything in the chat. We were talking beforehand too. I know, at least for me personally, sometimes you have to like digest everything and then think about how it applies to your organization. And then later on, you're like, oh, now I want to ask that question. But if anybody has any questions now or anything they want to ask or talk about, feel free to just unmute yourself and speak up. You don't have to use the chat. You don't have to raise your hand. You can just have at it.
I have a question, actually. In thinking about live events and knowing that our live event is also going to be a hybrid event, and we're going to be broadcasting live content to our attendees, obviously, I think this is going to cost us more money. So I'm curious to know what recommendations you have that are going to make it quality as well as affordable.
Sure. Obviously, any sort of services, commercially garnered, have some sort of expense associated. What I will say is, always ask, for anyone, always ask about what's possible. I think all of us have a lot of assumptions on, how much is this going to cost? How much is it going? It's going to be, and a lot of assumptions that it's going to be too much to do. In terms of there's a number of different factors depending on how you look at it. If from a financial model, if you are looking at increasing reach, you have the opportunity, depending on your financial model of your event, to also increase revenue through whether it's attendee direct or whether it's sponsor type partner programs. So there's different opportunities there. In terms of quality, just remembering everything that you send is what they're going to, what you control what they're going to see. So in terms of, are they going to see a wide shot camera from the back of the room, or are you going to do a closer in? Did you already have, like for some of our events, we already have cameras on site. So there's, for at least the general sessions, there's not really any, other than internet cost and a little extra forethought, but there's really not any extra expense on the streaming side. It's really going to be looking at like platform costs, staffing, how am I going to do moderation? Are people going to be sending in Q&A? Who's going to be paying attention to that? Is there a hotel internet cost associated that I got to deal with, which you may already be doing for staffing? So some of those aspects. If, depending on how flashy you want to get, if you want to start getting into some of those like higher end graphics and mixing together something that's more composited, knowing that you need to get like slides out there as well as people, things like that. Whoever is supporting you on your AV side may be able to answer some of those better. They may already have that capability built in. Like if you're running a TriCaster or something else, it's more of a multimedia switcher, a lot of those capabilities may already be there. And it's not really going to take much more to do that. Other ones, if you're using like hotel AV and you are working with a static switcher, or you're working with like an AV switcher, like a Kramer or something like that, where it's just switching from between laptops, then obviously there's a little bit more infrastructure to be involved. There's obviously opportunities on graphics, on attendee engagement, in terms of how do I not only get the graphics quality there, but how do I make the attendee feel more engaged? Can they send that Q&A back in? Can they chat with people? Can they be part of a virtual community with those in person? Those are all questions to be answered. One of the things we liked about our platform when we selected it is it lends well to hybrid. So the people who are using it in person can also use it virtually and vice versa. So it takes the place of some of the technologies that were already in play for the event. Things like a mobile app for the conference, a website system registration for the conference. And by doing that, by taking that place, it doesn't necessarily have, depending on the pricing, it doesn't have to add cost much over what you were already doing. Depending on what you were doing, like if you were using Guidebook, or if you're using Cvent or something else for a lot of these other aspects, and you get something, whether it's Cvent or another system that kind of does everything, you're just sort of adding something to what you're already doing. Like a lot of these software systems are families of software, they're not standalones. So adding capabilities isn't like a huge pull. So you got a couple of those areas. You got the AV side on site, internet, staffing, and then on the attendee portal side, and how crazy you get with the graphics, how intense and all that. It's really just kind of depends on where you want to go with that. There are some systems that lend more on the presentation side with presenter and slides. And then of course, on the video switching side, you can do things like that. I know it's kind of a generic answer. It's kind of a more tailored kind of answer to give based on certain specifics. But we could also follow up afterwards to try and answer that better. I'm sorry. Anyone else with any questions on messaging or graphical materials, or how to make attendees feel more at home when they come in? anything along those lines?
I'd just quickly love to know if from the events that you all have helped with, if you've had insight into any of the feedback. I don't know if, they did post-event surveys, or if they shared that with you, but, things that stuck out, comments and things about stuff that, could have been improved on, or that attendees thought went really, really well. If you, heard from the horse's mouth, any of that kind of feedback.
Yes, we've gotten some feedback back. We just started down the BizBout route recently. But Joseph, are you on audio?
Yes,
Okay.
I am.
Joseph was the event producer on a couple of our events this month. So he's heard back some of that feedback. Joseph?
Yeah, so the biggest part of feedback that I got that I was very surprised on is some of the students said that it was a better experience in their classes, which I thought was a very big compliment, because I know everyone is pretty much doing virtual, classes for the most part. A lot of them thought that it was very informational. I will say on the back side of it, the trainings that we helped with were very extensive, where they were going basically all day, or at least half a day. So some of the collegians did not understand that in the pre-communication, so they were having problems getting off of work and such. But overall, they were very happy with it. They thought it was easy to use. And to be honest, we've had more problems with alumni doing, taking that step over to virtual than the collegians. The collegians seem to just kind of take to it like a duck out of, a duck to water. But the alumni, especially that older generation, sometimes have a little bit more difficulty with the systems.
Yeah, we've seen that as well. And I think you make a good point about the communication, and as communicators, being mindful of explaining what's going to happen and how it's going to be facilitated, because it probably is different, and as much upfront information about the schedule and where things are happening is probably important to remember. That I want to be conscious of everybody's time. It is 1. So if you wouldn't mind, I know Hillary posted in the chat our FCA brown bag survey. Please give us feedback so we can continue to have presentations that are helpful to you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you to Zach and Karen, and to Corey and Joseph as well. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. And have a great day, everybody. We will get this up on YouTube in the next couple of weeks, so that it's available if you need to refer back to anything, and their contact information is there. So jot that down. Those questions that are going to pop up, and you least expect them, so that you know who to reach out to and ask.
Send them over if you have them.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Thank you.